Hello and welcome to the Board Gamer Girl channel. If you're new here, my name is Natalie and I like to talk about all things board games, but from a primarily solo perspective. Today we are doing a special video because it is Women's History Month and I am a woman. So I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to talk about women in board games in the community and in the industry. I do think bringing women into board games is beneficial for everyone and beneficial to the hobby. So when you're doing a game design or you're getting a community event together or just playing a game at your table, just the diversity of perspectives that you have at a table typically can enhance the experience for everyone. And maybe an example that I can give to how different perspectives matter in board games, like everything, but specifically we're talking about board games, is say you're making instead of a game, let's say you're making a toy, and your target audience set for this toy is between the ages of 8 to 15. But when you take your focus group, which is typically one that you play test your toy with, you only look at individuals who are aged 8 to 11. Well, you're missing a whole part of the targeted audience that you're looking towards. Now, this is obviously like my quick way of trying to randomly think of an example, but I find that as part of what women's voices can bring to board games. And this means all different groups of people, individuals, but it is important for our hobby. And the variety of voices in games can help give us perspectives that us personally in our own little environment may not be aware of. And I think that the board game industry has boomed even more because of different diversity of voices that are coming up in the hobbies. Now, some subjects I don't necessarily see as being too tricky, but as this is a different kind of video and I do want to promote safe spaces on this channel and all of my other media, I do want to mention that I am going to be monitoring the comments, and I really hope that we can keep discussion civil and with understanding of different perspectives. This is mostly a space where healthy discussion is encouraged, but how it's said and what you say matter. And mostly, pretty much to get to the point of it, I will have a zero tolerance for hate or hateful comments. Please and thank you. There are many other channels you can watch. You do not have to just watch this one. So, otherwise, let's get on with the video. And it is Women's History Month. That is exciting. But also, women exist 11 other months of the year. So to only have 1 month is a little weird and sad. But I do appreciate that we do get a time of the year that we get to focus on women. And so for this one, as a woman who has participated in the board game community and within the industry, I wanted to research a little bit about women in the industry and also different difficulties that women might have when approaching the hobby, what those might be, why they might be, and for some possible solutions to move forward. Because I think there is value in trying to come to solutions that are actionable solutions, pretty much, because I don't want to rant and rave. Like, I'm not doing this just to do that. I very much like to understand, see people from different perspectives, and hopefully come to a shared understanding of each other. Not everyone has to be best friends. Not everyone has to be for everyone. There's 7 or 8 billion people in the world, right? It is totally okay to not have to be buddy-buddy with every single person you pass. Whoops. I just knocked Buffy down. I am so strong. Anyways, so I think a lot of what may cause friction, other than like, we live in a certain society, a certain culture, raised a certain way. But with that, we all come from a different environment. So having to understand another person from their perspective can be a difficult task. So as a woman, going into different spaces, am I safe? Am I not safe? Do I automatically kind of like tense up? For me personally, just as also a more masculine presenting female who can be taken as visibly queer, there are spaces where I kind of question, will I be welcome? Will I be not? How will I be treated? All these things that kind of unconsciously go through your mind regardless of entering any kind of environment. And going to a board game event, some people, this isn't their perspective, so they're not even thinking about that. But in this community, we all say that everyone is welcome at our table. And sometimes I think that is part of this disconnect that sometimes we have. And it's no one's fault. There's no fault here at all. I don't believe, I'm sure there's people out there, but I don't believe that people wake up and think, I'm going to exclude this type of person from my game table, or I'm going to work to specifically exclude this group of people. Obviously, in the world, this does happen, but I like to think better and think there's just a disconnect in understanding, a disconnect in perspectives, or there's just like, you just don't think about it, and that's okay as well. So there's some examples that I'll give, and I'll also give a solution or call to action that we can have to maybe have us think a second before something occurs. And one of these instances is a term many people probably understand or have heard of, and that's mansplaining. And mansplaining tends to be a situation that predominantly tends to come from a man and ends up being something where they're explaining something to a woman, and sometimes it's something that the woman already knows, but the man wouldn't automatically think to give the same explanation to a man. It's a curious situation because a man could be trying to be helpful, right? But the question that you have to ask yourself is, why do you think that the woman is not an expert in strategy? Or if they're teaching the game, why they're not teaching the game the way that you want? Let it be said that there are many times that I need help with the strategy and I welcome the information, or I'm teaching a game and I've forgotten things. Trust me, it's almost a running joke at this time with my group. But one way that we can combat that or do better is just by acknowledging and asking before you do something. Because sometimes mansplaining borders on quarterbacking, which is something that is prevalent in the board game hobby, where one person kind of takes the role of maybe a co-op game or something and tells everyone what to do. So it's not necessarily that it's only an occurrence with men and women. There's quarterbacking as a similar situation that happens, and that kind of feeling can end up coming from mansplaining. And when that happens, just in general, it's like, ask yourself, why do I think that this woman is not an expert in the rules that she came to teach today? Or is there something that I might add that is helpful? So in the way that you approach that interaction, you can just ask them, I think, or I was led to believe, this is what we say in my group when a rule might not be going as well. And that's just a kinder, better way to do it. Or can I offer some advice? Like, just at least acknowledging the question, because at the same time, from going to board game events when I would go entirely by myself, and typically these events were predominantly male, but I know I was the only queer, masculine, female presenting woman there. So we had gone through the rules before the game, I had done the rules, and I had kept getting advice and stuff. At one point, I was kind of getting bothered with how often this was occurring from one person. But fearing social stigmatization, so to a degree, fearing there being a consequence if I spoke up to myself, because this was a new environment. There wasn't anyone else like me, and I didn't want to cause a consequence where their knee-jerk reaction is defensive. But the whole point is we're trying to communicate, and sometimes that communication doesn't go as well. The way we're trying to avoid it is by asking before we do something and getting permission to do so. In a new group, this is difficult to do, maybe, to be able to have those social cues. And again, I understand that sometimes social cues are difficult for some individuals to be able to grasp, and that's how communication can be very difficult. But also giving a safe enough space to mention some of these things before you play a game with a new person as well. Because, yeah, there's some people who have communication difficulties. So acknowledging that and keeping a safe space where people can say some of the difficulties that they'll have is a big thing that I think we can do going forward. Now, when it comes to the understanding or maybe the unconscious bias of why are we looking at women as individuals that we need to help along or may not be experts themselves and need some assistance with that. And part of that might be from a larger industry difficulty that we have. And part of this, like these two things interconnected, I was trying to look through a bunch of different things for this month, preparing for this video, as now it just looks like a bunch of rambling. But something I noticed recently is I was looking through a whole bunch of campaigns, and there was a campaign that recently came out. It had 38 different quotes. So of the 38 quotes that were on this campaign page from reviewers, not one was actually from a woman. And I feel like that is a big thing to point out. And then I started to look at other campaigns, or I started to look at other ads that other publishers do. And I think, honestly, that it's, again, one of those unconscious bias situations where you don't know what's happening or what you're repeating until you know. And part of that is, yes, there is less women representation in the hobby and in the industry, but how and when women are used in the industry and when they're used to promote a game and when they're not, whose opinions get valued, and those valued opinions, which ones are the ones occurring on different campaign pages. This, I think, sparks a little bit of a conversation that I haven't heard before. Anyways, and I do think it's something that we have to look at, because representation and how you're represented matters. And I'll take this from a personal perspective growing up. Finding out I was queer was basically from watching a TV program where someone said, "I think I'm gay." I wonder what program. She didn't say it. She wasn't the one who said it. But it clicked in me, like, you can do that, because I didn't know that for some reason that you could like someone of the same sex. And then I thought, oh crap, that could be me. And that was my initial instinct. And it's like, why was that my initial instinct? One, it's out of the normal. Anything out of the normal is, at times, can be seen as negative. But then as I grew up and representation in queer women personalities in the media showed up, my understanding of queer identity came from either two different perspectives. There were queer women who were with a woman for a short period of time, and then you would become this jealous, negative portrayal of a person, and they would need saving. And then the other perspective would be that once you reach your peak, like, love, yay, I found it, one of the people had to die. And these were two contrasting perspectives that were regularly portrayed, and sometimes the only portrayal of queer women in media for a very long time in the 2000s. Now, I say this because, one, that was my personal experience, but also when I went to school for communications and did media studies, I found these things out, which were like a light bulb in my head. That meant I understand now why and where those perspectives came from. So to loop this back into my understanding of women representation in the board game industry, how the industry has and can unconsciously influence how we play at our tables and how we see each other at the tables. So to me, you can't necessarily draw a direct line from representation to what it means in real life, unless sometimes you're someone who's affected by it and has seen and can understand that. But it's very difficult, little fuzzy, takes a freaking while. I mean, took me a whole bunch of years to understand everything. And I'm giving it to you in this little bloop. But when I was looking at the differences and the connections between mansplaining, this understanding at the table, and women's voices, and again, women from like 5-10 years ago have grown so much in the industry in all the areas. Now it's necessarily that there's representation, but when and how that representation occurs, why it occurs, and shaping it and the value of that. And again, I think that this is also nobody's fault. There is no fault. There is no blame in this. It's sometimes just something we don't think about because it isn't our world of understanding. And part of that is mostly what I wanted to talk about today. And if this comes as a realization to some people, I'm trying to make it as approachable or hopefully a area where we can learn more from each other, connect more between each other. Again, living in a virtual world, we have grown more distant, I feel. So there's more defensive talk in miscommunication and non-understanding than I feel ever in previous years. But there's like also this anger in or frustration in also wanting to understand or feeling like we're just like going over top of each other's heads because we're missing the perspectives of each person, and learning to listen, and instead of that knee-jerk reaction to get defensive is to understand each other. Or even say you get frustrated at something, mention you're frustrated at something and that you need a minute and then come back to the table or something like that. There's a lot of different ways that we can do things, and it's learning how each person works at a table, how they play. It's difficult when you're approaching a new community for the first time. And I'll say that this community has been very good to me coming into this hobby entirely by myself. Obviously, in every area, there are good apples, bad apples, but I've experienced more good apples. And if there's been negative experiences, a lot of the time you can rack that down to a miscommunication or just not understanding. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this video that I want to do. I hope this all makes sense because I've rambled for a long while and kind of went in a bunch of different directions. I don't really know as much of what I'm saying, but hopefully this works. And yeah, scared for the comments, but hoping for the best. Have a fabulous Women's History Month. And goodbye.